Hello, America, and happy Friday. This is a special edition of John Solomon Reports, a podcast from Just the News. You know about us now. You've been listening to us for several months. We want to thank you for joining us and joining in the fight for truth and justice that is all at the center of what Just the News and John Solomon Reports is about. So today, if we're going to have a special edition of the podcast, we better have a special guest, and I think we delivered. Why? Because we've got the one, the only, Tom Fitton, the head of Judicial Watch, the man whose lawsuits have brought to light much of the wrongdoing, not only in the Russia case, but in so many other aspects of our government. It's a watchdog that uses the Freedom of Information Act to file lawsuits that try to fight to get the American public, the American people, we the taxpayers, we the citizens, the sort of information we can use to judge the conduct of our political leaders and, of course, our government. And Tom and I have engaged over the years on many important stories, particularly when his lawsuits have brought to light government documents from the State Department, from the Justice Department, from the FBI, from other federal agencies in the alphabet soup swamp that is Washington. Well, today we're going to talk about the most important endeavors he has ongoing right now: State Department, Justice Department, FBI. Which documents are we gotten? Which documents should we be getting that the bureaucrats are holding back from us? This is a special edition, a special discussion. We're not going to do a monologue. We're going to get right to it. It's a rare moment when you can get a good half hour with Tom Fitton to talk about the future of disclosure in America. When I'm done, I think you'll be inspired to file your own FOIAs and try to get the ball rolling, to try to hold government account through the Freedom of Information Act to give us the truth. That's all we're asking for. We're not looking for politics. We're not looking for election outcomes. We're looking for the truth, just like our founding fathers intended. And that's why the FOIA law, by the way, it still works. Yeah, you got to go to court sometimes. I've sued several times, but the more you work at it, the more we can force into public the truth, and the better our government can be, because its citizenry can act as an additional watchdog, an additional check and balance on government power, government conduct, government ethics. And Tom Fitton and his great group, Judicial Watch, have been at the heart of this for a very, very long time. And I'm proud that on this Friday, in the middle of August, that we have an opportunity to sit for a half hour and talk about information flow in America, freedom of information, putting a check and balance on our government. So we're going to go to this quick commercial break. Remember to support our sponsors and advertisers. They're amazing. They make this programming. They make the reporting of Just the News possible. And when we come back, a half hour one-on-one conversation with none other than Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch. You know how I like to finish my summer night? Well, with one of the best steaks you can get from my friends at Kansas City Steaks. So if you want to make this summer's grilling season one you'll never forget, then you go with world-famous Kansas City Steaks, delivered straight to your door. Turn your house into the steakhouse with Kansas City Steaks. They have basically every cut of meat imaginable, like filet mignon, ribeye, and strip steaks, plus pork, chicken, seafood, sides, desserts, and so much more. All big, bold, and full of mouth-watering flavor. There's nothing like the sizzle of a steak hitting the hot grill on a summer night. Now enjoy the steakhouse quality you love in the comfort of your backyard. Find your perfect combo today at kansascitysteaks.com. Right now they're offering an amazing deal. Go to kansascitysteaks.com and use the promo code JUSTNEWS, all one word now, Just News, at the checkout, and you receive 10 free steak burgers and free shipping on orders of $75 or more. That is a crazy good deal. You can also call 1-800-987-8325 and mention the code Just News to receive this special offer. That's kansascitysteaks.com and enter the code Just News at checkout, or call 1-800-987-8325 and mention the code Just News, no space there. kansascitysteaks.com. It's the starting point for an incredible summer dinner. All right, folks, I promised a special podcast this week, and to have a special podcast, you have to have a very special guest, and we have that today. Tom Fitton, the head of Judicial Watch. Welcome to John Solomon Reports.
John, good to be with you. Appreciate your great work.
Well, same here. I couldn't write a lot of the things I've written in the last 10 years if it wasn't for the extraordinary work of Judicial Watch and fighting for public information that bureaucrats have tried to hide. So we're deeply indebted to you and your group and your lawyers for all they've achieved in getting transparency for the American public.
Well, thank you very much for the good word.
Yeah, same here. All right. You have so many amazing things going on, lawsuits winding their way in. I wonder if we can just start a big picture for a second. You're fighting to get truth out, truth that would not only help President Trump, but particularly the American people. And yet, even in his administration, you're finding these efforts to hide, slow down, deceive, so that they don't have to release documents. Give us some of the more frustrating examples of this sort of obstruction of the public flow of information that you're wading through right now.
Well, on Obamagate, for instance, we have asked for, I don't even want to think when we began asking. I think it was in 2017 when it was first exposed what Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were up to. We asked for their communications with each other. And it's been years, and they've been slow walking the release of the records. They only review the records at the rate of 500 pages a month. We only get a portion, obviously, of what they review.
Right.
And at this rate, we won't get all the Page-Strzok communications until when? The end of next year, well into the next administration.
Unbelievable.
And this is a sort of material that could have been released at the drop of a hat. And frankly, if it had been released in a timely way, for instance, we would have known about the shenanigans with General Flynn.
Right.
We would have known. Just recently, we found that Strzok was trying to use the counterintelligence briefings not to spy on candidate Trump, but to spy on President Trump and the White House. Extraordinary material that they've been sitting on for years over at the FBI.
And now it's funny. Remember 3 years ago, people say, oh, you're making it up. It's a lie. It's a conspiracy theory that there was spying going on. Now the media and the Democrats don't even try to go there because you proved it. I mean, that January 21st, 2017 briefing, which we wrote about in Just the News, all our listeners are going to be familiar with that. It's amazing that it's 2020 and that's the first time we learn it. Crazy, just crazy stuff.
It is, and the way the media deals with it is they just ignore that it's happening.
Yeah.
So we have confirmation that not only were they spying on Trump as a candidate, but that they continued it after he was president, and the media pretends it's not important. It's interesting. We're tearing around, and the left is going around tearing down statues of politicians from the 19th century, but we're not allowed to ask questions about what Obama did 4 years ago.
Yeah, and by the way, we're heading into the 2020 election, and we still haven't figured out everything that happened in 2016, and we'd know far less if it wasn't for what Judicial Watch and you have done. It's just unbelievable that 4 years later, the bureaucracy won't let us see what they did. It's sinful. It really is.
Well, in the Justice Department and the State Department, in the case of Mrs. Clinton, and certainly the FBI, which is really part of the Justice Department in the sense that Barr is ultimately responsible for everything Ray does.
Right.
There've been no change in terms of transparency. There've been modest disclosures. Frankly, I think generated more by the Office of Director of National Intelligence than the Justice Department. But it's really inexcusable at this point because we're not asking for special treatment. We're asking that the law be followed. And the law requires that the government turn over documents more or less within 20 days or maybe 2 months at most.
Right.
And obviously when they're taking years and years to turn documents over, that's just contempt for the rule of law, in my view, and the people's right to know about the worst corruption scandal in American history.
It's just hideous. It's unthinkable to think that even in an administration that would benefit from the flow of this information, that there are these bureaucrats that control the FOIA offices in the departments, and they're just simply shutting off the spigot and trying to hide what went on. And at some point, there has to be a greater penalty. I just won a lawsuit in St. Louis in the state court where the prosecutor, Kim Gardner, now has to write me a $5,000 check as a penalty because she's been withholding evidence in some of her prosecutions. But, the taxpayers will pay for that. It's crazy. They ought to pay for it with their job or their own personal money when they obstruct us, and they don't. So Just crazy.
Yeah, but you raised the point though, and for your listeners, FOIA isn't just for John Solomon or Judicial Watch; it's for the citizens.
Yeah, the public.
So there are open records laws at the state level that are frankly more powerful sometimes than the federal law, or you provide greater access and ease of access than even federal records laws do.
Right.
And so all of what we're talking about, you can ask for documents too, dear listeners. And I encourage you to do so. And, it's easy to do. And as citizens, you have a right to do it. And it's a precious right because, for all of our complaints, we have the rule of law here in the United States that allows us to go to court against the Justice Department, the FBI, the State Department. In your case, well, you've done litigation against those agencies as well, but at the state level as well. That's not true most of the rest of the world. And we have the right to petition our government and hold it accountable in a court of law. And God bless America that we're able to do what we're able to do, because despite all the complaints, material still comes out that's astonishing and changes the course of history.
It does. And in your group particularly, I mean, Judicial Watch, we can go through and find real moments in history where the public's knowledge changed because of litigation that you guys brought. It is a gift, and you guys exercise it well on behalf of the American public. So we're so grateful of that. You've got a bunch of big litigation that's pending that could have, if the bureaucrats comply, could have a profound impact even before Election Day. You had a suit this week where you've gone to court now to get the rest of Hunter Biden's travel records. Talk about what you found in the first dump of records, and then the oddity of the fact that there's like 3 years of records missing. Bring us up to speed on that very important public disclosure case.
Well, he's a private individual, so you can only get so much information about what he's up to. But one way to figure out where he was is to ask the Secret Service about details of his protection. Within reason, obviously, we're not going to get security issues that should be private, but the cost of the protection and things like that. And we found in our request, in response to our request, that he flew to 29 different countries, or had 29 foreign trips, on which he received Secret Service protection. I know you're interested in a trip to Moscow. What was really interesting, and we were talking about this earlier, John, before the show, is that these documents had been turned over to the Senate, but hadn't been released. We asked for them and got them, and of course we released them. And this is the problem I have with Congress is oftentimes they have documents that they get from the executive branch, they don't release them. And that's why you need independent entities, and frankly, journalists like yourself, to try to get the documents separately, because Congress can't be relied on, even if they're trying to do what they can in good faith to get the word out about what the government's really up to.
Yeah.
But what is also interesting, though, quickly about the Biden records is there's no record showing he went to Ukraine.
That's my favorite part
of it. Secret Service protection.
Yeah.
Before he was hired by Burisma. Isn't that quite the hat trick?
I thought that was the jewel of many jewels in there, but
the dog that didn't bark. The fact that he didn't go to Ukraine before he was hired by Burisma for that sweetheart job.
Well, it's one of the few facts that back up the Hunter Biden story, which is he had no expertise. When he did that ABC interview, he basically acknowledged he got the job because of his last name. Well, your records show that he hadn't even been to Ukraine. He doesn't have natural gas experience. Obviously, he doesn't know about Ukrainian law, and yet he ends up landing a $3 million 2-year gig, at least certainly the money that flowed to his company through that. That was such an important finding. Talk about some of the other important countries that you found him flying to, because they fall into his father's portfolio, right? What you really see is he's kind of in the vapor trail of his dad's policy portfolio, going to these countries while Joe Biden is overseeing the policy. What were some of the other important trips that stood out in your mind?
Well, there were 5 trips to China. I mean, that's really readily apparent as important. And one of those trips, obviously, I think is one of the infamous trip where he attended
a hotel meeting, right?
Yeah, but he flew over on Air Force Two. Biden was involved, at least the vice president was involved, at least in one of the meetings, at least in an incidental way. And as a result of that trip, he was able to get the franchise, as I call it, from the Chinese that was worth, $1.5 billion potentially.
Right.
So that's a big deal. And, so we got the initial group of records, but we did notice that they hadn't produced records for the last 2.5 years of the Obama administration. So we want to know where else he went and want more details on the trips previous. So we've had to sue in federal court for it. And, it's frustrating because this is just basic information we're asking for. But, as I often say, we have to sue to get the time of day sometimes.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, it's the first round, the 440 trips that you found in the first round are so illustrative because you can now track where he was, and now we can create a timetable. We not only know about the business deals, we'll now know when he was traveling and where, and that really is a public service. And people say, well, he's a private individual, but the answer is he was flying in the vapor trail of his father's very public policy role, and that's why we have these conflict of interest statutes in America, which is that if someone like Joe Biden is involved in a policy that he knows will impact his immediate family financially, he's supposed to recuse himself, right? You don't dispute the impeachment witness's testimony that Joe Biden and his son engaged in the appearance of a conflict of interest that would be prohibited under the law, right?
I thought that was the most important testimony of the impeachment because obviously it was no testimony that the president did anything wrong, but there was testimony confirming that agencies of the Obama administration, both the White House, the State Department, were concerned about Hunter Biden's business dealings. Yeah. That's testimony that Adam Schiff helpfully got for us.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And we look back now at some of the testimony that people gave in that hearing, and there's new documents thanks to you and my lawsuit and others. It's clear that Hunter Biden's name was being used as a bludgeon inside the State Department to say, you've got to make these Burisma corruption allegations go away because Hunter Biden's on the board. So they were really using the vice president's son's name in the State Department as an excuse for why they should shut down the Burisma investigation. That's why these conflict of interest statutes exist. And Adam Schiff gave us that testimony, thankfully.
Back in the day, and this reminds me, this is a nonpartisan issue.
You're right.
You remember Dick Cheney and Halliburton.
Yes.
And back during the war, we asked for documents about Halliburton during the Bush administration. And the Bush administration, the Bush White House said there's no connection. The vice president's no longer involved in Halliburton. All what you would expect the White House to say.
Right.
Well, in fact, the agencies were very much aware of the connection.
That's right.
And they were concerned about it.
Yep.
So, and then Halliburton got special favors, it looked like, in a way that they probably shouldn't have. And it led pretty much anyone looking at the documents to say what was going on here. In fact, we had one woman sign off on it, and she was doing it under objection because she thought something was going on with Halliburton. So, I mean, this is nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun. The only difference is that we're only allowed to look at conflicts of Republicans and not Democrats. Well, and we don't buy into that. We look at conflicts of everybody.
Yep, no, that's true. Your record has been to be apartisan and to just go where there's symbols or signs of wrongdoing and find out if it's really there. And that's been what's made Judicial Watch so valuable to the American public for so many years now. What are some of the other big litigations that you're in the middle of now that you think could yield important information before the election, after the election? What are the ones that you think are the most important ones on the front lines right now?
Well, we have several Biden lawsuits against the State Department. I mean, we just, and of course, the State Department pretended that coronavirus meant they couldn't do any FOIA.
Right.
So they essentially shut down for months. Now they're beginning to turn over documents, but of course they're slow rolling the release of documents.
That's right.
I think the first batch we got that was significant were essentially news articles they were sending around to each other.
Wow.
And this is related to Biden's firing of, because in my view it was his firing of Shokin in the Ukraine.
Right.
So they're sitting on a mother load of documents at the State Department, not only about Biden, but also about the targeting of Trump. And I guess I can understand politically why the administration doesn't want to go back over that old ground.
Right.
But the president was right. The Ukrainians were messing with our elections in a substantial way by working with the Obama administration, and that deserves to be disclosed. And there's a lot of corruption in terms of taxpayer funding that both you and Rudy Giuliani has quite diligently exposed that deserves to be talked about more.
Yeah. Well, they sure were scared about that stuff. They sure took some bites out of my hide trying to scare people away from looking at that reporting. But the great thing about stories like this, you can't hide the facts. And eventually, even if it takes a little more time and a little more pain and grit, we always get the truth out. I have a personal interest in one of your lawsuits. I always like to put my biases or my personal interest in there. But you were instrumental in bringing to light the fact that there are documents, which you're still fighting for, by the way, that showed that there was a targeting of maybe 13 or 14 people in the spring of 2019, where the State Department tasked or tried to task people to monitor social media of various people. And if I understand correctly, tell me if your information matches what I'm learning in my reporting, that when the request came in, it even suggested that the people they were looking at were Trump people. There's when they identified the targets that they wanted to monitor, there was something about Trump in the request that made it so unusual. You don't ask for your boss's people, right? You say monitor these people. Have you found any evidence that the requests in the spring of 19 to monitor my social media, others' social media, had something to do in the requests about Trump or supporting Trump or perception of Trump?
Well, that's a good question. Our initial reporting was that the Ambassador Yovanovitch at the time had directed the staff to monitor what was being said about Ukraine and her and Soros, which is interesting, and Biden, if I recall correctly. The problem they had was they were being asked to do too much out in the Ukraine embassy, so they sought help at the State Department here in D.C., and someone here in D.C. said, hold on a second, you can't do that. It's illegal.
Right.
Just because you're monitoring social media, which is public, doesn't mean you're allowed to, because you're creating a file on a U.S. citizen.
Right.
And you can't do that unless you kind of follow the law, and they weren't doing that. Now, Yovanovitch has denied this generally without, kind of an odd way. So it's a question as to how it went about, how it actually happened.
Right.
What's frustrating, John, is that they've had this request. It's a straightforward request, and they've been slow walking. They haven't given us, I think, one document on it yet.
Unbelievable.
And we know the documents are there based on our separate reporting. We know there's documents.
Yes.
And they're sitting on really evidence, in my view, of a crime, because violating the Privacy Act is a federal crime.
Yeah.
And they don't want to release any of it to us. I don't know if you've been able to ask for it on your behalf either, but
I have. I've got the same overwhelming response you got, which is nothing. And so we've gone to court as well. We've sued as well. I was shown some documents the other day that relate to this, and it's clear that the Kiev embassy was told that their actions had violated federal law. And I think when we can get that document into the public in a way I can report, or that you can get it through FOIA, we're going to find out that this wasn't just a policy issue. This was a personal vendetta, personal retribution effort to target people who the embassy didn't like their point of view or their reporting on. And I think that's scary. And I'm not the only one on that list. Tell us some of the names that your sources told you were also on the list. It wasn't just me. There were a lot of people on that list, right?
Well, it was Rudy Giuliani. I think Sean Hannity was on the list. I'm going on memory here.
Laura
Donald
Ingraham,
Trump
Jr. Right?
Laura Ingraham, the president's son, Donald Trump Jr.
Right.
And so a whole host of people were on the list. And Yovanovitch clearly was worried about what was going on with Biden and Soros. And, one of the big issues, at least in Ukraine, was you had Soros providing money to one of the groups who were seemingly involved in this Ukraine effort to just disrupt our elections and attack Trump. And, of course, that group's also getting money from the State Department.
Right.
So you've got these joint operations going on, and I think they still are going on between Soros and the State Department in terms of funding these radical groups in European countries and elsewhere that are at odds with, I think, the values of many Americans in terms of being pro-socialist and anti-conservative.
Such a good point. I think we'll find out that the selection of people wasn't based on a business need, but on a perceived political orientation that they were looking to monitor. And that will raise questions about whether the embassy was really engaging in politics and not foreign policy, which is, I think...
I mean, the only outlier on the list I recall was the Obama's former ambassador to Russia. And frankly, that's the exception that proves the rule.
I have a reason why that person is probably on that list.
Yeah, I think I know too. Yeah. But, and it's not because he was doing anything wrong, but because he was not seen as a friend. That's right. How I look at it.
Well, even more so, at that moment in time when my social media was being monitored, I was in conversations to bring that person on the television show at Hill TV. And I wonder aloud when I see the ambassador's name on there, whether or not at some point my overseas conversations were monitored, because I know of a very personal effort I made to try to get him on my show to talk about what was going on in Ukraine. And why did I want him to come on and talk? Because at the moment in March where this is March of 2019, it's about 6 months before the impeachment fiasco started, Yovanovitch had created a controversy in Ukraine. Her conduct created a controversy. Why was it? There are 3 or 4 weeks before the Ukrainian election, and she goes out and recommends the firing of a prosecutor under Poroshenko's watch, and it was viewed by the Ukrainians as interference in the election. And I was looking to get an experienced Democrat ambassador to come on our show to talk about, was that a misstep? What repercussions does it have? And it's remarkable to me that he doesn't fit with all the other people on that list in terms of pedigree. I leave often wondering whether some form of intercepts or overseas conversations were monitored, because otherwise he doesn't make sense being on that list. And I personally have the knowledge, which is I know I was trying to get him to come on the show to talk about what had happened in Ukraine because it created a controversy. Yovanovitch had to come. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you raise a point that's worth expanding on. We presume I think many presume that the monitoring of Trump, the illegal spying on Trump, was limited to Trump and Trump world. And to me, it's pretty clear the deep state, the Obama administration, saw an opportunity. They understood and figured out that if they used overseas intelligence resources abroad, they could monitor Americans more easily. And I suspect, and you suspect, that American citizens who were seen as critics of the Obama administration also were amassed or monitored, either out of D.C. or, as you point out, maybe at individual embassies when they thought the need to. And it wasn't for counterintelligence reasons; it was because they were Googling political enemies using NSA databases to see what would pop up.
Yeah, that's what makes me think that the Bash prosecution, U.S. Attorney of Texas, John Bash, who's working on the unmasking and the upstream searching, that may turn out to be, of all the 3 investigations independently that Bill Barr has launched, Durham, Jensen on Flynn, Bash on unmasking, that one could yield the most dramatic evidence of wrongdoing. And if there was an enemies list, and I don't think I'm on an enemies list, but if there was an effort to use this to monitor perceived political enemies, that will be as chilling as anything ever revealed in American history. And I think we're waiting to find out what the truth is. What else? You're doing some good work in coronavirus.
But I don't want to leave this issue because I just remembered you were involved in another scandal or a victim.
Yeah.
Adam Schiff.
Yeah, released my phone records.
He released your darn phone records. He secretly subpoenaed the phone records of Rudy Giuliani and his American business buddy or colleague. And then published your phone records.
Yeah, without ever interviewing me to have the context. What he did is he exposed contacts of mine that had nothing to do with the Ukraine story. Some of the calls he put out in the open, I know firsthand what they were about, and they weren't about Ukraine. One of the things that people don't realize is that Rudy Giuliani didn't start providing, offering me information. I ended up never really reporting much that Rudy gave me because by the time he gave it to me, I'd already done my work and I already had the stories out. But a lot of my conversations with Rudy Giuliani in March and April were about the Russia case, about the impending Mueller report, and Adam Schiff puts them out with no investigation, using McCarthy-like tactics, never even interviews me. Tells me he wasn't interested in what the calls were really about. He just wanted to do it to create the illusion of wrongdoing. It's terrible. It's just
well,
terrible,
it is
Tom.
terrible. And, we sued to try to get the records, at least
Right.
the secret subpoena, and we were unsuccessful, at least initially, with the district court.
Right.
But let me be clear. They're taking the position, forget about Obama spying.
Right.
The House of Representatives has taken a legal position that they can secretly subpoena an American's phone records and who knows what else, and then publish them without any accountability. Now, if a cop went and got your phone records without a court-authorized subpoena, they'd be facing prosecution.
They would.
But Adam Schiff is taking on to himself a new power for Congress to secretly subpoena people's phone records, contrary to every constitutional norm and amendment.
It is remarkable. And you know what was most heartbreaking for me personally? I remember when the media got upset when Corey Lewandowski touched the hand of a reporter who was trying to keep up with the president. And again, I wouldn't condone that behavior. I don't think it was very serious behavior, but I wouldn't condone it. But not a single one of the profession, except for the Wall Street Journal's editorial page, even saw anything wrong with what Adam Schiff did in releasing a reporter's contacts. And I think that's a sad statement about the current media's. Apparently the First Amendment is selective for the media today. And I found that the most demoralizing point. If it wasn't for folks like you and others who spoke out in the Wall Street Journal op-ed pages, I don't think anyone would have cared. And we live in a time where the mores of our professions have been badly distorted. It's terrible.
It is, and liberalism has died in the media in the old-fashioned sense of the word, and it's been replaced by a radical leftism that puts power and politics above, the sort of principles of journalism they presumably have been following.
Well, we gotta tug it back, because I still believe journalism, when done right, is such an important vehicle. And many of the great stories written off of your documents prove that. Over the years, we learned things from the Judicial Watch that really informed the public and changed the course of history. And journalists writing about it's an important distribution. But right now, they seem to be disinterested in so much of the important stuff you're finding. I want to switch to one other topic, because I know we know your work on Russia and Ukraine is epic and important to everything we've learned. But you have a lot of other lawsuits that are looking at things like NIH and budget and other things. Tell me about one lawsuit that hasn't gotten attention yet that you think is a really important public interest issue that we should all be watching for the good work of Judicial Watch.
Well, we have an interesting lawsuit over, and we're working with other journalists over our friends over at the Daily Caller News Foundation to get the records of Dr. Fauci and his top deputy from the early days of the coronavirus crisis about communications related to coronavirus, WHO, and China. And we think that would be very interesting to see. I don't necessarily think Fauci was doing anything wrong,
right,
but I do want to know what the Chinese and WHO were telling our government early on. And I think it would be very interesting to see how they were being lied to, because I suspect that's what we'll find.
Yeah.
It's frustrating that they haven't turned over any documents, but they did confirm to us they found potentially 9,000 responsive records on their email systems, and now they have to kind of review those. And
9,000, really?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't read, they use numbers like that to scare us, to kind of suggest they can never turn them over to us in a timely way.
Well, at $500 a month, it'll take them 3 years to get it to you.
Well, that's what I fear. That's what I fear. And, if I were the president and on not only coronavirus, but on every topic of public policy concern, I'd be all hands on deck. I'd go on a transparency tear, say, release everything, err on the side of disclosure, and timely disclosure.
Well, the president clearly has been in favor. I know personally, just from having conversations, that he does believe in transparency, and sometimes transparency is painful for everybody. But he did it with the Ukraine conversation. I think that was historic when he released the transcript of his conversation with Zelensky. But it was necessary for the American people to realize that a charade was going on. But there's a great moment here on China, on health issues, to achieve more transparency. And I will be looking with bated breath to see what your lawsuit produces there, Tom. I could talk all day with you. You are an amazing resource for reporters who care about the truth. And we want to, on behalf of all of us who do the type of work we do in journalism, I want to thank you and Judicial Watch for helping us understand what goes on in our government. And let's make this a regular thing. I would love to have you back on the podcast regularly to talk about all the great endeavors that you're doing.
There's something going on every day, as you know, in the world of investigative journalism and just investigations generally.
Yeah.
It's never going to stop, and it's not going to stop no matter who wins in November.
That's right. Yep. Well, our founding fathers wanted transparency to be one of those checks and balances. And thanks to your great work and your instincts and the effort, I don't think, appreciate how much effort a FOIA lawsuit takes. I do, after watching great lawyers fight through it like you, or like your group has done. But at the end of the day, these are hard work when you have to get into litigation. And we're just so grateful that you fight for the American public to learn the things that we've been able to learn. So thank you, Tom.
Well, you're welcome, and one day you'll get that Pulitzer, John.
I'm not holding my breath. I'm much more interested in the next good document. That's far more important than any award.
I hear you.
Well, folks, you've been listening to the one and only Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch. We're going to come back from a commercial break and wrap things up. You know what can give your age away right away? A saggy jawline and a double chin. But not anymore. Introducing the brand new Genucel jawline treatment from Chamonix with dual peptide and MDL technology. Now, they say this is their most advanced technology ever, and I believe it. It promises to not only tighten a saggy jawline, but it plumps the lipophilic layers of your skin to contour and define the jawline within minutes. I didn't even know I had lipophilic layers until recently. You take care of them, they take care of you. Using peptides and metolactones together for the first time, they swear it will work quickly with results that get better each day. 100% guarantee, or you get your money back. Genucel is the quintessential American story. It was first developed by a compounding pharmacist in New Jersey who specially crafted it for just one of his customers. 20 years later, it's turned into a national brand rooted in natural ingredients. Now, Genucel's jawline treatment is yours free when you order Genucel for under-eye bags and puffiness. So go to Genucel.com, enter the promo code JUSTNEWS in step 4 at the checkout, and get $30 off your order. Also, make sure to choose John Solomon in the How Did You Hear About Us box. That's Genucel.com. Use the promo code JUSTNEWS in step 4 at checkout for your $30 off your order. You know what I love over the summer? Getting together with people you love at a barbecue. There's nothing quite like it. Talking about the good old days over a hot dog and grandma's potato salad. And this summer, give everyone something new to talk about and show up to your barbecue looking 10 years younger. That's right, I said 10 years younger. And you can show everyone your new you by using Plexiderm. Plexiderm is a clinically studied serum that visibly eliminates your wrinkles, your fine lines, and your under-eye bags. And it works in less than 10 minutes. The results last for hours, long after everyone's finished off the watermelon and fruit salad. Plexiderm even works on laugh lines, number 11s, and crow's feet. Take up to 10 years off of your appearance this summer in less than 10 minutes with Plexiderm. I use it. It works. You can try a 6-application trial pack for $14.95 with free shipping when you visit tryplexiderm.com, or you can call 800-685-1292. Let me give you that again, 800-685-1292. Either at tryplexiderm.com or the phone number, you use the code VOICES. This order also comes with a free shipping and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Make those wrinkles, lines, and under-eye bags disappear with Plexiderm. Visit tryplexiderm.com or call 800-685-1292 and say the code VOICES, VOICES, at checkout. All right, folks, that wraps up a special edition of John Solomon Reports. I think you know why we called it special. It's not very often that we get the chance to talk to Tom Fitton and brainstorm about the most important issues in America that need to be disclosed through the Freedom of Information Act, through federal agencies, through the act of disclosure by our government. And remember, I think what Tom said was so important. This is not about politics. We're not trying to help or hurt Donald Trump. We're not trying to help or hurt Dr. Fauci or the Congress. We're trying to get the American people a set of facts upon which they can make their own independent judgments about the conduct of their government, whether it's Adam Schiff or Devin Nunes, Donald Trump or Nancy Pelosi, the NIH, the FBI, the DOJ. It's all about using truth as a check and balance to make sure that we get the best government our dollars can pay for, the government that's closest to what our founding fathers so brilliantly created 244 plus years ago in Philadelphia. So people like Tom Fitton play such an important role. His group, Judicial Watch, plays an important role. Sure, we're antagonistic when we sue. No one likes to sue. It's expensive. It's time consuming. But today, it's one of the ways that we can ensure that you, the public, you, the voting public, you, the American people, you, the citizenry whose government must respond to you, that you have the information, the facts that permanent bureaucrats in the government might not have wanted to give up. And that's why we had the conversation we did today. I'm so grateful. Please enjoy your weekend. Have a healthy, happy, safe August weekend. I hope you're going to the beach or sitting out on the deck and catching a sunshine. If you're going to read a great book, I may recommend Fallout, my book with Seamus Bruner. And here's another one. I'll give you a homework assignment. I know that sounds kind of corny, but Matt Margolis has a new book out called Airborne. It is a remarkable analysis of the failures of the American news media covering the ongoing COVID crisis. Yes, this is a real life book playing out in real time. How Matt pulled it off to find these really significant failures in reporting and pull all the facts together is amazing. He's going to be our special guest because we're going to have another special edition of John Solomon Reports on Monday. That's right, Matt Margolis, the author of Airborne. It's a great story, factual-based story of how the American news media have let us down. If you want to get ahead of that, order his book on Amazon, download it on the Kindle, read it this weekend. The interview will make a lot more sense on Monday. If not, you can go to the jtnshop.com. That's right, the Just the News store. That's where you've been getting all that lobster and crab legs and the Clean Phone Pro cleaner and other great items that you've been buying, supporting our journalism in the process. Matt Margolis' book is now up for purchase there. I hope you enjoy it. Hope you enjoyed this special podcast with Tom Fitton. Have a blessed weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. Unfortunately, COVID-19 infection rates are exploding across the nation. We know it's common sense that everyone wear a face mask. And finally, most states have put mask mandates in place. Face masks are still our best way to protect ourselves, our family, and our community. But what happens when the masks are fraudulent or worthless? The FDA has provided a list of authorized respirator mask manufacturers. Finding those masks has been a challenge, and verifying their authenticity even harder. So right now at jtnshop.com, that's the official store of Just the News, we have FDA-authorized respirator masks with anti-fake authentication on every package, so you can be assured you're getting exactly what you need. These masks are tested by the MPPTL in the United States and provide greater than 95% filtration. They've even been used in the medical community. Now, right now, these masks are in stock and shipped for free. So go to jtnshop.com and order your supply today. That's jtnshop.com, the official store of Just the News. Get them and keep yourself, your family, and your community safe. Go to jtnshop.com right now. Right now. Right now. Right now.